So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this month's Discover Tennessee History webinar. We're really excited to have this month's presenter from the Abraham Lincoln Library and Museum with us. That'll be Natalie Sweet, and I'll turn over her in just a second. But before I do that, a couple of quick housekeeping things. Again, for those participating live, be sure to keep your mics muted. Rename yourself, and of course, we want these to be interactive. So be sure to use that chat box to interact with us throughout the session. Also, with this series, we have been doing a Padlet page, and so you can actually find the resources for today's session as well as for all of the previous sessions within the Discover Tennessee History webinar series. So be sure to check that out either using the QR code there or the link. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to this month's presenter, Natalie Sweet. So Natalie.
Hello. Thank you, Kara. It's nice to be with you all today. My name is Natalie Sweet, and I'm the Program and Education Coordinator at the Abraham Lincoln Library and Museum in Harrogate, Tennessee. We're located right where Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia meet one another. And of course, as a result of that, the thing we focus on most is Civil War history. Part of our mission is not just telling the story of Abraham Lincoln's life, but the story of Tennessee during that Civil War as well. And one thing that we hold in our collection that we're pretty proud of and we use quite frequently is our Civil War music collection. We actually have thousands of pieces of music within the collection that we use to teach students, to help them understand the popular culture of the time period and also to understand the Civil War itself. So our session today is titled Singing Through the War, Music as a Primary Source. And I will share my screen now. All right, hope everyone can see. So what we're covering today, we're going to look at it as sleuthing through song. As I've noted, we have a large music collection, over 1,300 pieces in all, and we use that to teach Civil War history. But using music as a primary source, and particularly in using it to look at Tennessee history, is a little bit tricky. As with all primary sources, we have to think carefully and analyze primary sources with the type of source in mind that we are looking at and all the bias that can come with those particular sources. As educators, I'm certain that everyone is familiar with what a primary source is, but it's always helpful to share that with your students. Primary source, it's a first-hand account from the past, from someone who experienced an event of interest, knew or met a person of interest, or who visited a particular place at a particular point of interest. In other words, it's someone in the room where it happened, to quote from Hamilton. So some of our examples, we have recorded words, letters, newspapers, diaries, and scrapbooks. We utilize images, pictures, paintings, photographs, cartoons, and then objects themselves, clothes, household items, personal items, and tools. But music in and of itself can fall into a little bit of a different category. A lot of times the people who wrote the music during the Civil War period weren't, let's say, at the Battle of Fort Donelson or at the Battle of Shiloh. They may not have personally known John Bell or Parson Brownlow, but they still wrote songs about those events. And their experience of writing those songs and of sharing the popular understanding, while it may not tell us, might not be anything we want to factually base our understanding of the battle of, it can help us think a little bit about how people who are living at the time period viewed a people or a place or thing, how they celebrated it, or, quite frankly, what they were proud about it, or maybe how they were angry about something as well. So let's talk just a little bit more about how music can be a primary source that teaches us about the past. And in order to do that, I want you to think about music that you listen to and enjoy today. That popular music, that which exists in the past that we'll be talking about, and that which exists in today, it tells a story. Because of its very nature, there's a few things we have to keep in mind when we're examining music as a primary source. Popular music tells stories. It tells stories about things that are of interest to the larger public. Now, does that mean it will have a firsthand eyewitness account? No, not necessarily. Does it might possibly mean that we can think about it as having a pulse or its finger on the pulse of general attitudes? Possibly, especially if we consider the popularity of a song and how it is purchased in sheet music form or how it goes on to survive into the current era as well. One thing to think about too when you're thinking about popular music, it's made to invoke emotion. Think about your favorite songs that you listen to today. You probably turn on music to pump yourself up. Maybe you listen to it at a ball game. Maybe you play it when you're feeling sad or down, just kind of want to lean into that. Maybe you play it when you're thinking about a particular event that causes strong emotion. We might think back to songs from the time of Vietnam, such as War, What Is It Good For? Or even if you bring it up closer to the present era, look at the time of the early 2000s, look at some of Green Day's title items from that time period. It can reflect thoughts of a group, maybe not everyone as a whole, but it can maybe capture a subset of those thoughts. The reason for because of why music is made, it can tell us about popular sentiments that existed within a time period. And it can maybe even help us understand some of the errors in popular thinking about a place or a location as well, because stereotypes can come through in songs too, if you look closely. Now, to help you keep track of observations, what we do at the Abraham Lincoln Library Museum is that we actually have primary source helpers that help us help students think about the sheet music that they are looking at. And because some sheet music from the Civil War went on to survive to be songs that became folk songs that was played in the present day, we're going to have a few opportunities today to listen to some of those songs as they would have been played in the 1800s as well. First thing we always want our students to be looking at, what is the song's title? Who is it written by? And the idea behind the shaping of these questions is to provide students a basis to eventually be able to look at the facts of what they know and then be able to dig in deeper. Because just like we would be interested in the author of a book or maybe even a newspaper article to know a little bit more about them, the students might want to take the opportunity later on to look for sources about the author of the musical piece as well. We ask them to think about what the song is about. What is the story that is being told? What's the obvious story? Are there main characters? A lot of songs usually revolve around a people, or many times there will be two people within songs. There's a lot of love songs out there. What are the places described in the song? Now, a lot of the songs that we're going to look at today, actually all of the songs, either has a person or is focused on the place itself of Tennessee. It is set in Tennessee. We've also got to think about who the intended audience is. Who would be listening to this? What would their experience of listening to that song be like? From there, we can begin to ask the students what events from the time that the song was written, how might that help them understand why it was written? What is influencing the creation of the song? Next, we get into a little bit of the personal. Students might have an emotional reaction to some of the songs that they read or listen to that I will be playing today. And you might find yourself having those types of emotions too. It's worth noting that to see how it makes you feel listening to it today. We might think about the tempo of the song. Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it upbeat? Are we supposed to feel sad while we're listening to it? Music, again, evokes emotion. That is its job. And the instruments that's used, that can play a part in the type of emotions that you are expected to feel when you listen to it. If you bring all these together, we then ask the students, what do we think the creator of the song wanted their audience to feel as they listened? In turn, if they're wanting to evoke certain thoughts, how does that then affect the concept of the place that is being described within the song, of the people who are being described within the song? And if that's what we're looking into, why does it all matter? What should we think? With that in mind, we're going to go to our very first piece. Now, by image, he may not be familiar, but does anyone know, and you can look at the title of the song, who this piece is about? This, as you can see, is dedicated to the Honorable John Bell of Tennessee. It's called the Union Bell Polka. Now, anyone who is familiar with Weird Al might have thoughts of what polka sounds like today. It's usually more upbeat. Wouldn't quite take on the same characteristic, of course, of the time in 1860 when this particular piece was made, but it is centered around John Bell of Tennessee and his running to be president of the United States in 1860. The song has more music than it has words, but the words that are present within the song are here on our page as well. The Union Bell Polka. Hark, the Union Bell is ringing. All the land its echoes hear. Listen what its notes are telling. Free men hark, for peace is near. All unworthy passions buried by the voice of this great bell. Brothers rise and live as brothers, and loud the Union chorus swell. Now we do have some participants on the webinar with us today. And using some of the questions that I put forth, and maybe taking some of the context you know about John Bell, why do you think that this piece of music was written?
So it seems like it's campaign propaganda.
Yeah, you're on point with that. What would make you think it was campaign propaganda? First, we can look at the date.
It's a song for one thing. It's a popular piece, and it's meant to get people engaged and kind of happy, to be supporting this not so happy looking man.
He certainly doesn't look like the type of gentleman for which a polka would be brought out for, does he? A little more serious of note. But campaign rallies for candidates were very upbeat affairs in the 1860s. Large gatherings, barbecues, you might have parades, people making banners, supporting their candidate, and of course, too, while we may think of candidates today of borrowing from popular American songs, it was very common within the 1800s for some songs to be written for candidates to promote them. Now, Bell didn't just have one person for opposition within the presidential election of 1860. There were three others as well. And Bell, as we know too, from understanding the context of 1860, who can recall the party that he is running under?
It's the Constitutional Union Party.
The Constitutional Union Party. What is your familiarity with the Constitutional Union Party?
Well, in the election of 1860, you had your Southern Democrats, you had your new Republican Party, and you had this new party, the Constitutional Union Party, which kind of helped split the vote. And the only state that voted for John Bell was Tennessee. And then, of course, the Southern states went for the Democrats and the Northern states went for the Republicans, and all heck broke loose.
Mm-hmm. And what followed was our nation's Civil War. But notice the wording. You can get a little sense of that platform that John Bell is putting forward. Brothers rise and live as brothers. You're feeling some of that tension from the time period too. They're making this a bit of a campaign push. Hey, if we don't want to go too far one way or too far the other, let's unite. And Bell is the man to help us do that. As the war progressed, one of the popular forms of music that came out of the Civil War were descriptive pieces of battles that did not necessarily have words that were sang, but which, if you listened, you would sense the emotional swelling of the song, and it would come narrated. So the idea was that you would be able to listen to the music, but you could also see the sheet music and understand how the battle was unfolding based on the crescendo of the horns or the seriousness of the violins. And that's what Floyd's retreat from Fort Donelson is. Take a moment and look through this piece. Now, if you are not a music note reader, and a lot of your students likely may not have that ability, they might still notice, and you might still bring in other pieces to kind of point out the crescendos that you're seeing in points, moments of rise and intensity in the song. It begins with a trumpet call to arms. Floyd fires the Southern heart. He urges his men to die in the last ditch rather than surrender. On to Donelson. Floyd steals a march towards Donelson. Floyd jubilant within the fort. And the piece continues. What does this type of music make you think of? Does it make you think of anything that relates to modern music today? A type of music that is supposed to make you feel certain emotions without words.
So the first thing that comes to my mind is the Imperial March from Star Wars.
Yes.
No words, but you always have an emotional reaction to hearing that.
Yes, you know that somebody is coming, that it means business. It doesn't sound peaceful coming towards you. It's not like the birds as they arrive in Sleeping Beauty.
And I see a lot of chords and a lot of it looked it does seem like an orderly progression. So it's very organized. And it's got that kind of full grand sound, so it might be a little intimidating.
So as we take it to another portion of the piece, you can see here the chords, it becomes more intense even as we go. The repulse, batteries retaken, and by this we're referring to United States forces. Shells from the gunboats. Union shout of victory on a Buckner, a surrender. Hurrah for the Union. You noted the Imperial March. And what I think every time I see these battle pieces that don't have songs that are sung, I do think of a lot of John Williams or Hans Zimmer, if you're familiar with that. If you've watched The Crown and you see that opening piece where the crown and you feel the sense of enormity that comes with the song. We're talking about something deep, something that's heavy. These songs are encouraging people at the time period who may not have been able to participate in the battle to feel the emotion swelling from that battle. How do you think these types of music as messengers might appeal to people who are not literate at the time period?
Now I have a question. Where would this have been played at?
So this would have been played at public settings, in communities, with private bands that are in areas, in opera houses as well. They sold them as sets. So if we actually go back, you can see this is a part of a series by Oliver Bitson and Company from Boston that notes a number of significant battles. But look at the battles too. Are these all battles that took place in the United States or from the same event? We'll see that there is the Battle of Alma, the Battle of Gettysburg, the Battle of New Orleans, the Battle of Port Royal, the Battle of Prague, the Battle of Roanoke, Beauregard's retreat from Shiloh or skedaddles, the Battle March of Delhi, the Battle of Sebastopol, the Battle of Shiloh or Pittsburgh's Landing, the Battle of Waterloo, the fall of Sebastopol, Floyd's retreat from Fort Donelson, the siege of Paris, Santa Anna's retreat, and Price's retreat.
That's a really interesting mix of events.
Isn't it? Now, some battles may immediately stand out to us with our 21st century minds. Battle of New Orleans is definitely familiar to us as Tennesseans. Battle of Gettysburg, yep. Battle of Waterloo, if you know European history, is a pretty big, significant battle. Santa Anna's retreat. That's a key, what will become a key part of Texas history and also American history or even mythology. Those are considered to be major and significant battles in world history, right? What does it say to us that they considered the Battle of Shiloh, Floyd's retreat, and even Beauregard's retreat from Shiloh worthy of being placed with battles like Gettysburg and Waterloo and New Orleans.
I mean, you can make the argument that all those battles were kind of, significant and almost turning points in their respective wars.
Mm-hmm.
Fort Donelson was a really big deal. I mean, it led to the occupation of Nashville.
It does.
So it's interesting to see it up there with all these other very significant battles.
And it's worth noting, this is a piece we should think about where it's being produced out of too. We as Tennesseans today, I think automatically too, we certainly, taking Tennessee history, understand the importance of Fort Donelson, and it's something we emphasize in our standards too. But for this piece that was made after the wars concluded, they identify 3 significant battles from the Civil War. And 2 of them are in Tennessee. 2 of the songs are at Shiloh alone, and 1 is at Fort Donelson. So that tells us a little bit looking at it too. It's seeing that popular perception, the looking at it, the understanding of the emotion. These were pieces that might have been played together. They might have been played separately, but they were all played certainly at one point or another in the cities of Philadelphia and Chicago and Boston for larger audiences who would have by this point have been a few years removed from the Civil War, who had experienced the battles, and it's now living on in popular memory, and it's still carrying on significance. Now, one thing that can take these pieces to another level, if you share them with your students, is the ability to listen. Because it is helpful. Stacy, I could see that you were reading the music and you could tell how it was flowing, but for all audiences, you see notes, and those are, as my husband says, chicken scratches on paper. It does not really mean that much to him. The experience of hearing a piece played or sung is one that can really help your students understand how both the words and the songs carry meaning and help convey emotion and ideas about a place or event. So, but first, we'll begin with a lot of the pieces in our collection with music have a gripping photo at the front to help you think about and first conceptualize an event. Because, it's kind of like reading a book today. They say don't judge a book by its cover, but that cover image is put there to sell that piece as well. So let's take a look at what was being put on a piece that became very popular during the Civil War. That was called The Drummer Boy of Shiloh. And there's actually, this song would go on to be printed by a number of different printers, and there would be different covers of it. But this is a cover that we have in our collection. So let's take a moment and look at the image and see what we see. What's conveyed about Shiloh?
I see a lot of smoke.
Lots of smoke.
So that must be from gunfire, and it contributes to confusion.
We might note the trees as well. Those aren't full trees, or even trees that are just missing leaves on branches. It appears that they're misshapen, suggesting that perhaps the fury of battle has eliminated elements of the trees.
And we see some guys who, there's one there that's on the right that looks like he's kind of fallen. A couple more that look injured in some ways.
It looks like one of them, I don't know if he's holding his face out of injury or if it's anguish.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I thought so too, Stacy. I thought devastation was, what I interpreted when I looked at him. Like, he is devastated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You'll see that the author of this piece, too, if we look at it, it's by Will S. Hayes. He had already written a very popular sentimental piece called I'm Looking for Him Home. And it also is noted to be a beautiful ballad. So when we see some of the words that are written here, one thing that we'll see from some of the stanzas that are listed, we're going to be looking at death. And I am going to click listen here. You can see another image.
On Shiloh's dark and bloody ground, the dead and wounded lay. Amongst them was a drummer boy, who beat the drum that day. A wounded soldier held him up, his drum was by his side. He clasped his hands, then raised his eyes, and prayed before he died. He clasped his hands, then raised his eyes, and prayed before he died. Look down upon the battlefield, oh,
So, with that being heard, listening to the words, how did you feel after you heard the song? Melancholy. Yeah, it is a particularly sad song.
Yeah, despair.
Despair, depressing. Yeah, but for as depressing as it was a hugely popular song after it was written. What might tell us about? Uh, it was beautifully sung. What might that tell us about the meaning that people put into the words, or maybe how they connected to the song?
I think in a way it was cathartic, because a lot of the nation was experiencing this kind of despair and melancholy at this time. And to have it kind of beautifully expressed like this may have helped people deal with that. I don't know.
Yeah, it does present. It's certainly set at Shiloh, at a particular battlefield. Did you get the sense, though, that that might stand in for many mothers' sons across the war? It is interesting, though, that out of all the settings they picked for the young man to be, they chose Shiloh to be the location. It could have been at Gettysburg, it could have been in Antietam, it could have been at Bull Run, but Shiloh was chosen. If you take the context from what you know about the actual Battle of Shiloh and its importance and significance, and the longer story that is the American Civil War, why do you think that Shiloh was chosen?
Well, I know that it was when Shiloh occurred, there were more casualties at Shiloh than any other day in American history up to that point. And I think that it was one of those moments when people realized just what the toll was going to be in terms of human life, and that it wasn't going to be just glorious battles. The battles were actually going to be really horrifying. And also Shiloh, the name Shiloh has this kind of romantic, peaceful connotation to it, that you contrast the peacefulness of that name and the biblical, reference with the actual horror of that day.
Yeah, Shiloh certainly, for all of the reasons that you listed, really glommed on to the American conscious. We might think about those, for us as adults. We've lived through a number of significant historical moments today, and there are some things that will stand out to you more just because maybe it knocked you out of your understanding of how the world worked, or maybe how you thought something was going to turn out, or how you thought life was going to be. And for this particular songwriter, Shiloh was the image that he chose. And it might help us to reflect too that, we always note when we study Civil War history that Virginia has the most battles, but Tennessee, when you take battles and skirmishes and just outright fighting, it takes place, a great deal of it, in Tennessee. So a lot of mothers lost children in Tennessee. A lot of family members did as well. That might be something too that we consider when we think about why the author chose this piece and why it went on to be so popular with Americans as well. Make sure that, is it still sharing my screen? Okay. We'll go back then. And two, it might help us then think more about this picture that we saw previously too. The picture does illustrate the song. Can we identify the drummer boy now within the image?
I mean, he's next to the drum, right? But is he the one on the ground or the one with on his knees?
Well, we might look. The one who's on the ground is grasping a gun, but the one is being held up, as in the song. One of his fellow soldiers has grabbed onto him and is helping him to make the praying supplication. But the reason, other than the ones who are dying near him are gathered around in horror, is because they're mourning the loss of this young man. And with all that death surrounding them, is it notable that they chose to focus on the youngest member there who was dying?
I think that would really speak to, again, the kind of the horror of war, cutting down, these person who supposedly would have, their whole life ahead of them.
Yeah, everyone there would have been older in all likelihood, even if they were teenagers themselves at 18, than that young man. We might consider too, one of the most famous drummer boys of the Civil War, Johnny Clem, was just 9 years old when he eventually marched off and ended up in Tennessee fighting as well. So we have that in the national image too. Now, later on, as the war concluded, some of these songs actually grew in popularity in the post-Civil War era. But this was one written in 1865. It's called Carry Me Back to Tennessee, or Ellie Ree. And it's sung by Carter's Zouave Troupe, created in Philadelphia. And we also have audio for it, which I am going to share.
With Canva, we design thumbnails together.
Before you can skip this ad.
And done.
Wow.
Sweet Ellie Ree, so dear to me, is lost forevermore. Our home was down in Tennessee before this cruel war. Then carry me back to Tennessee, back where I long to be, among the fields of yellow corn, to my darling Ellie Ree. Oh, why did I from day to day keep wishing to be free, and from my home run away and leave my Ellie Ree? Then carry
All right. So taking a look at that or listen to that, what do you take away from this piece? What is it about?
Well, it has a more upbeat feel to it, and also makes me think of songs we might hear today. Like there are definitely similarities between some kind of bluegrass and country music that you might hear.
It does have a bluegrass feel, and I do think that is probably meant to lend itself to Tennessee. And as Stacy noted in the comments, Tennessee does fit well lyrically within songs too.
Yeah, it's a place that people like to sing about. I've noticed a lot once you think about it. This, I mean, even just the title, Carry Me Back to Tennessee, has a nostalgic feel to it. And I think that there were a lot of nostalgia songs that came out of the Civil War because people just sensed that a way of life was gone forever.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you note that a way of life is gone forever. Because now, well, let's think back to those worksheet questions that I presented you with. Who do you think, if you had to say what the story was about, what would you say is the point of this story from a first listen? What is the story it's telling? Well, I'll put it this way. Maybe we should dig a little deeper into it too. Let's think of it this. Who are the characters? Can you identify the people in the song?
Natalie, I was thinking that it might be about not a married couple, but maybe a courting couple, a young soldier, and then there was a young woman back at home, and that's why they are now lost to one another, that maybe her family moved on.
Maybe their family moved on. Maybe that is the story. And that's what the story could be and the characters could be. But let's note too, who sang this song? We note here it's Carter's Zouave Troop. Now, what your students may think of when they first see Zouave and think Civil War, they might think Zouave soldiers. But Zouave was a term for the exotic at the time period too. And if you gave them the task to do what they could find out about who Carter's Zouave Troop were, you would find that they were a minstrel performance show. Does that change your thoughts on what the song might be back about now?
Are you hinting that it might be African Americans singing the song?
Or maybe not even African Americans singing the song, but white people putting on blackface, portraying African Americans in a song. If we look,
that's a different thought.
it is a different thought, isn't it? And it's a very popular song from the time period. How does that change the way you view the song?
Well, I don't think that African Americans would be nostalgic for the pre-Civil War life.
Yeah, they would not be. But who did it benefit to think that they were?
White audiences.
White audiences.
From the
maybe
South.
Who are
The
longing
South,
for
of
the
course.
days.
Right. The idea that the plantation was a good place for everybody and we miss it.
Yes.
Yeah, but minstrel shows were also really popular in the North. So
it was.
So
how would that then? Why would that be popular in a place like the North, because this was made in Philadelphia.
Well, I think then it becomes, this, wanting to capture this again, that bygone era and this ideal that people had about what life was like there. A very
Yeah, and
idealized version of that.
yeah, and it was an exoticized version of it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is a good piece to show that songs could be tricky, can't they, when we're looking at them as sources? Because I think, even when I first saw the song, listened to the song, my first thought was, oh, he's missing a love. They've been separated by war. And then we started doing a little bit digger deeping, saying, okay, who was it who would have sung this? Or would have been sung? Who it would have appealed to? That's the ultimate trick of looking at songs as primary sources. And if you have songs who are using songs for primary sources, that's one thing that we really have to be mindful about when we're looking at it with them. We have to be thinking about who the audience was, who would have been listening to it, who was singing it, who was creating it, what is the emotion that they want you to take away? What do they want you to feel from the song? Because when you do hear the song, you do feel the longing, the missing, them wanting them to be together. Well, if all this hadn't have happened, they could have still been back in the fields with the corn. And so it does present a much more complicated view of it as a source. And so if you had a student who was using this, let's say for National History Day, it could be a very easy first misread when you're listening. So that's one of the reasons why it's important to go over songs and to show them the way that it can be, digging deeper, digging into the layers can really help you think more deeply and better understand popular perceptions that are existing within a time period. And it's worthwhile to note too that all the exercises that we did today dealt with songs in Tennessee and Tennessee history, but the Civil War is not the only war for which music will be produced by. You could take those music worksheets and apply them to different periods in different eras. Listen to the music, think about what they are listening to, why these songs are being made, and maybe even why these songs are being made, created, and sang when they are. Why are they reaching popularity at a particular moment in time? And I'll just conclude by saying that we'll be putting these resources up on the Padlet for Discover Tennessee History, but we also keep this resource and more at the Abraham Lincoln Library and Museum page. And we too have an educator's Padlet full of all sorts of resources, professional development, materials, secondary and primary source investigative tools as well. Any questions? Well, with that, I will turn it back to Kira, and I thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you, Natalie. Let's see here. Let me pull up my final slides here for us. All right, so as we get ready to close out, just again, a reminder where you can find that Padlet that Natalie was mentioning, where we'll have the links and materials for today's session. Also, we hope that you will join us for next month's session. We have the Tennessee State Museum will be presenting about Tennessee's first peoples. You can find a description of that session and all of the other upcoming sessions in this monthly series at the web address there listed. We will have sessions every month through the month of March. You can register for those. The link for that is also there on that web page. If you're interested in getting PD credit after participating in today's session or viewing the recording, please complete the short survey at the link that you see here. We send out PD certificates about once a week. So again, just be on the lookout for that. And of course, you can view today's session for PD credit or any of the others there in that series. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and you can also use this QR code here to access that survey link. So we hope that you will come back and join us again, and please feel free to reach out to us if you have any suggestions or questions about topics related to Tennessee history. Thanks and have a great day.